So for this first video, I wanted to do something involving Ko, and specifically talking about Ko threats. This is something that I see not a lot of players in the Q ranks pay any attention to, really. It's choosing their Ko threats wisely, and since there's a lot of mistakes being made, we're going to go over just some of the basics here. So we have a situation on the board. It's a little artificial. The main thing to note is that the group up in the upper right is Mii at S17 or T14 for making two eyes. And we're just going to create a Ko here. And white attacks black shape, black makes a Ko. And the burden here in this type of situation, particularly anywhere near the opening, is the burden of this Ko is going to be on black because white captures first. And this is something you should always look at if you're creating a Ko shape or forcing a Ko shape, is which player takes the Ko first. And maybe towards the end of the game you know you have way more Ko threats and it doesn't matter. Towards the beginning though, you're likely to only have one or two each, if either of you have any, and whoever takes the Ko first is going to be at a huge advantage. So this Ko is usually not advantageous for black to start, which is why we don't usually see a 3-3 invasion when there's a knight's enclosure off the 4-4. So black's just going to go ahead and take the Ko threat that's available here, force white to live. Black's going to retake the Ko. And white doesn't have a whole lot going here, so white's going to play the best Ko threat possible, which is the threat to break the Shamari apart, and black's just going to resolve the Ko, and then white can end with this shape right here. So we see black got big corner, destroyed a lot of this potential, and it's like, what are these four white stones even doing? They're hardly accomplishing anything at this point. The same, though, can kind of be said for these two black stones that just got brutally separated like this. Black's going to have to do something with one of them to kind of eke out some sort of position in the lower left. But let's go back, though, and look at the other option for a Ko threat, which is throwing in breaking the eye shape on the inside, forcing white to come and make two eyes over here. Black can retake the Ko. And this time the situation has changed a little bit, because this move threatens to kill the group again. So not only, we're getting an extra Ko threat out of it, essentially. Now, I want to be clear, this is not a good move, and I'll go over that in a second, but just notice for right now that black can actually respond to this. When white takes the Ko, black can threaten the white group again, white has to live, black retakes the Ko, and now this is not quite as good. This crosscut is still harsh. Like, black will not come to, a totally satisfactory situation in the lower left, but it's not as bad as just being bluntly separated with a white stone on c4. There's still something going on between these three black stones. Black will obviously now has no more Ko threats against this group, so is going to capture this, and then white will have to follow up and try and do some damage down here, maybe something like this. And white's going to get, black can make a position on either side depending on which is more valuable, but white's definitely getting more here, considering that black started with an enclosure and now is, in kind of a rough situation. But again, not as bad as the original separation. So given that black gets a better situation in the lower left, why not play the Ko threat at S17? And there's a very good reason for that, and that's that this move is costing us points. So let's just go back to the first one. Here, white has to live. White lives with 2 points of territory. Eventually, black will have to connect here, and we can see maybe 8 points of territory happening. I'm confident giving these two to us because we're so thick up here. Now, if we go to the other one, right away, throwing in and forcing white to live this way immediately loses 3 points. And because before white had 2 points of territory, now white has the 1, 2, 3, 4 plus 1 for the capture is 5. So white's immediately 3 points better off. 3 points doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 3 points for just playing a move. There's no guarantee that you're winning the Ko, you're just losing 3 points playing this move. So obviously we would normally never play something like that. But it's actually a lot worse than that, because you're not just losing the 3 points, you've just given white really awesome endgame. So if we go back here and just to look at what's going to happen now, white is going to push here, black has to fall back all the way to S11, and then white can push here, block, push here, block. And that area that we kind of had on the right, where we were making territory, now it's looking like, oh, there's like just a few points over here. And this all happens in Sente, so this is going to be free for white. And we know it's going to be white's endgame, because even if white, whatever, if black does play this, it's absolute gote. It has no effect against the stones in the corner. So even if black does take a turn to play this at some point, white will just get a big point somewhere else and be totally satisfied. At some point, white is going to get this point. So if we compare it to where initially we forced white to live on the inside by playing from the outside, and eventually we're going to connect here, have these 8 points right here. If we check the alternative, throw in, white descends, and then white pushes out, and all of this happens, then out of those 8 points we counted originally, there's only 3 now. So that's an additional 5-point loss that's eventually going to occur in endgame at some point. So 3 plus 5, that's 8 points. This is an 8-point loss to play this co-threat, which is huge. That's, you know, obviously that's bigger than Komi. There's very, very little to recommend that. And basically, the argument that can be made is that basically by playing that co-threat, black is saying that this position right here is obviously at least 8 points better for black than this position right here. And that's just not clear. And highly unlikely regardless. Black can still, you know, Hane and jump, make some sort of position, just extend on the side over here. There's still, you know, black's not, the game isn't over because this enclosure got split. And playing a move that costs 8 points is unless this is an all-dominating ko that, like, whoever wins this ko just wins the game, then you can consider this type of threat. But generally speaking, you really want to make sure that when you play a co-threat, it's not costing you anything. Ideally, co-threats should be as clean as possible. So another good rule of thumb is to play from the outside rather than play on the inside. So here, endgame moves that have strong follow-ups are usually excellent candidates for co-threats, and here we have an endgame move where the follow-up is to kill, which is about as big as you can get. So this is an excellent, excellent co-threat. And then once this goes ahead, no matter what white does at this point, black just needs to resolve the ko. Never be afraid to resolve large kos like this, even if you're taking a sort of strategic loss somewhere else. This is definitely, this transforms the corner where white played 2 moves into just kind of a series of useless stones. And while this, you could say similar things about this, it's not as definitive as capturing 2 stones. This is completely alive. This will still have to make shape somehow. Even though the black stones are weak, it doesn't really matter. There's not a bunch of white stones right around. White can only get so much overall from this separating maneuver. Now, the other thing, though, is that once we have gotten into this second ko-threat is fine. And if this were the situation on the board, as is, and the ko had just started, now playing, let's just progress, playing this ko-threat doesn't matter, because we play inside, but we force white to play inside. So white had 5 points in here before, white still has 1, 2, 3, plus the 2 captures is 5. White hasn't gained anything this time around. But to get that ko-threat, we have to play this first one. And if you read professional commentaries at all, this is the type of ko-threat that they'll describe as painful, because you're losing so much just to get the extra ko-threat behind this, that it's almost never worth it. Similar situations occur sometimes you'll see players in a ladder situation like this play out a ladder move as a co-threat, and then, you know, go to resolve the co somewhere. Black will play, and then white will play the broken, or the, you know, the ladder out as a co-threat. This is just absolutely brutal. You could let your opponent do this all day long if they wanted to, because at this point, black doesn't even care about this co anymore. Like, once we have a few stones in a ladder that we can capture with something like this, this shape is just so unbelievably thick and insane. And granted, white gets a good corner and relatively thick shape too, but I mean, this just dominates this whole area of the board. Like, white will never get anything in the center for the rest of this game, and in exchange, we gave away, maybe 15, 20 points in the corner. Not really a big deal when you know that that's the last territory your opponent is making for the rest of the game. So, basically, the main thing is, look at your co-threats, make sure they're not costing you points, try to play from the outside, force your opponent to play inside, and just try and look for things that are really clean. And like I said, a good candidate is endgame moves with really big follow-ups, even if the endgame move itself is not so big. This is, you know, a 6-point endgame move, but the follow-up is to kill the group. If it were just a 6-point endgame move and white were already alive, then that wouldn't matter for this co over here. White would just ignore and end the co, and that would be the end of that. So, thank you for watching. I think next we'll be going over a situation that came up in Game 3 of the Lisedal Uli Jubango series. There's a very interesting co-situation that persists on the board for a long time, and it took me a while to figure out exactly what was going on when I first reviewed the game, and I think that it's worth reviewing because it's complex, and to get a better idea of like what's going on the board and how pros are analyzing a co-situation. So hopefully you'll check back in for that one. I should have that up in a few days, and thank you for watching.